Kick things off with Naparima MP and UNC Shadow Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Security, a man who is no stranger to the Observer, Rodney Charles. Pleasant good evening to you, Mr. Charles.
Good evening, sir. Good evening.
It's a pleasure.
Good evening to your viewers.
Thank you so much. Had to have you back on because your issues basically is what people are talking about. They're observing, so we need to bring the conversation to them. In one of your releases, you said that Trinidad and Tobago must strongly support Guyana while employing diplomacy to resolve the territorial dispute with Venezuela. It takes me back to a saying by former British Prime Minister Sir Winston Churchill: diplomacy is the art of telling people to go to hell in such a way that they ask for directions. How ticklish is this situation?
Very, very ticklish, Mikee K. Very, very. Sometimes I get the impression that we, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. I hope that is not the situation with Trinidad and Tobago. But you see, what is happening before our very eyes is a geopolitical nightmare. You see, Venezuela has close links with Iran, has close links with Russia, close links with China. And we are, in essence, we work closely with the United States, the EU. Traditionally, we have relations with Russia and China and whatnot, but primarily with the United States, with the EU, and such countries. And now we are in this maelstrom, and I'm not sure that we have thought through the realities. Now, Venezuela is laying claim to 2/3 of Guyana. Guyana is a fellow CARICOM state. It has historic Commonwealth, other links with Trinidad and Tobago. And we, at some point, will have to decide whether we would support Guyana or whether we would support Venezuela. And Venezuela is very astute. What they have done is engage us and woven us into arrangements, energy arrangements with Loran Manatee, which is a cross-border natural gas reservoir, and Dragon gas. Now, these are all good, and we hope that they work because we have a shortage of gas supplies in Trinidad and Tobago for energy sector. But we have a problem there. First problem is we are tying our economic future to Venezuela. You recall that Germany tied its energy future to Russia. And because of that, it had problems when Russia attacked Ukraine. Germany was initially in a tight situation because of the fact that most of its energy came from Gazprom, from Russia. We are in a situation where if we side in future, if we side with Guyana, Venezuela could turn off the gas from Loran Manatee and Dragon gas. So what is required is adroit diplomatic threading of many needles. Venezuela has indicated that there's going to be a referendum in December this year. It's a couple of weeks from now. And they're asking their citizens to vote on whether or not the Essequibo region, which is the energy-rich region of Guyana, whether that should become a state of Venezuela. And the population that resides there now will become Venezuelan citizens. Now, if the Venezuelans vote yes, and I understand that Maduro is pushing that, and most of the people who are opposed to Maduro are outside, 7 million Venezuelans outside. Right. So if they vote for that, then that becomes the policy of Venezuela. And all of us will have to decide. Now, I could take... Go on.
Now, you made it quite clear that this country cannot remain silent on this issue. We don't have that luxury. We can't afford to simply just be an observer to what may be looked upon as international injustice. And you said that for the very least, this country must leverage our current good relations with Maduro to be an honest broker to help resolve the border dispute. Now, there's so many things that are still up in the air. You spoke about the energy. We're hearing about the dragon gas. Perhaps the administration may not want to basically thought that, or should I say, ruin the chances of that becoming a reality by getting involved. Or again, do we have that luxury to just simply be observers?
Do we have that luxury? Well, Eric Williams, the founding father of Trinidad and Tobago, won at a PNM convention in Chagaramas that ultimately Trinidad and Tobago has to confront what he called the recolonization ambitions of Venezuela. Let me tell you something. In Venezuela, students are taught that we in the Caribbean are what they call zona en reclamation. That means a zone to be reclaimed. We are, historically, they believe that Trinidad and Tobago, and it was when the British, Sir Ralph Abercrombie, won the Apodaca. I think I'm trying to recall my history here, many years.
Yeah.
We ceased being a Spanish colony and part of Venezuela, and became part of the British Empire. Now Venezuela has always had ambitions, and we have to look at things like Petrocaribe. Was that part of the process of getting us dependent on Venezuela? Eric Williams, when we had, for example, the Black Power riots, the Venezuelans offered to send troops, warships, aircraft to Trinidad to help us deal with the problems we had in the 1970s. And Eric Williams pointedly told them, no, do not come in to Trinidad and Tobago territorial water. Stay outside, be a deterrent outside, but do not fly over our airspace, do not come into our waters, and do not send troops. Because he was concerned that once that happens, where would it end? And I think we have to be careful that if we are 7 miles away from Venezuela,
yeah.
we have 80,000, 70,000, we don't know the figures, of Venezuelans living in Trinidad.
Yeah, but
What?
Yeah, go ahead. No, and again, what the leverage that we have that you mentioned is the fact that this administration has displayed a very, we say, chummy or a good relationship with Maduro and his administration.
Yeah.
But does that mean that they're still are they in any position to actually say, listen, we think that you need to resolve this issue as diplomatic as possible, or is that still something that, as you said, looking upon this region as one that has to be reclaimed? Because people are going to treat you the way they see you.
Correct. And we have good relations with Maduro, Venezuela right now, but who is to say that 20 years from now, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, a new government comes in Venezuela, and they say, listen, we do not care about what was done by Maduro, we are onto a new policy arrangement. Now, Eric Williams was very astute. What he did was he encouraged deeper relations with Brazil, because Brazil is the big guy in this region, and Brazil would not tolerate boundary changes in this sphere because it will create chaos.
Right.
So when I worked at Trinidad, there were a team from Petrobras, Trinidad in Point Fortin. That was around 1980. There was a team from Petrobras, and we were asking why is Petrobras here? What do they have to offer? And then somebody whispered that was part of Eric Williams's attempt to balance our foreign policy so that we are not totally dependent on Venezuela. You'll recall that Gerard Montano he was replaced by Patrick Manning in San Fernando East. But Gerard Montano, after the Black Power, was sent to Brazil, right? And as our ambassador to Brazil. And this was all, and these are part of the how we could deal with this situation. Clearly, we have to deepen our relations with the United States. Secondly,
all right, and that's a good point. And that's the point that many people have been saying. Where do we stand now currently? I mean, have we burned bridges? Have we created problems? Has there been some geopolitical shift as far as what is the policy of Trinidad and Tobago on many of these issues that we have somehow dropped the ball when it comes to diplomacy? Where do we stand currently as far as with our allies in order for us to have some sort of leverage or backing? Because Will Rogers said it best. He said diplomacy is saying nice doggy until you find a big stone. That's what he said.
Correct. But we are not sure. We have to hope that somebody in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, some group, some team, is working on a policy options so that when scenarios shift, we could adjust to certain new realities. And here I have to ask, well, what is the Institute of International Relations doing in the UAE? They're silent. One gets the impression that they just teach, receive knowledge from textbooks, put a lot of textbook information in our students, and our students leave without any appreciation of the policy options that are required in terms of our foreign policy arrangements. So, for example, we need to, what is our role in the OAS? We should have clear instructions. At the OAS, we are going to push for the sanctity of border arrangements. So we should be moving a motion at the OAS to reinforce that. We should be at the United Nations doing the same thing, because we have to be careful. We have Russia has just invaded Ukraine, so the sanctity of borders inquiry. We have China wanting to have reclaim Taiwan.
Taiwan, yes.
Yeah, we have Venezuela actually on the verge, well, we hope that this is just posturing, on the verge of reclaiming Guyana. And the question is, we have to reinforce the sanctity of border arrangements. Right now, we are fortunate to have the President of the General Assembly, Ambassador Francis. We should be having diplomatic notes to him to see, could he leverage his position? He's there for 1 year. Could he leverage that position to ensure that Trinidad and Tobago is kept whole? Now let me also say, Eric Williams understood the threat of Venezuela, and he took steps. He made sure that Venezuela did not come into Trinidad to give us troops and whatnot in the Black Bar rats. They actually had soldiers and planes lined up to come to Trinidad. He blocked. He developed counter relations with the United States. He tightened his relationships with Canada. He also made policy arrangements to draw closer to Brazil. Now, all of these things, each by itself is not important, but collectively, they created a counterbalance to Venezuela.
Of course.
I'm hoping that at the OAS, at the United Nations, in CARICOM, if we are invaded at some stage, and let's face it, we have 70,000, 80,000, we don't know, and that is another problem. We have to ensure that the population of Venezuelans is kept at bay. Now, what I mean is that our borders have to be made less porous.
Right.
If we don't, and we have 100,000 or so, 150,000, let's assume, Venezuelans living in Trinidad, we better have a policy in Trinidad to ensure that they're integrated into our society. We can't leave them on the margins. We can't have their children not going to school. And if their children go to school, they cannot be disadvantaged with an education system that is not bilingual.
Yeah, but Mr. Charles, with all due respect, we have seen, and I've spoken to Yesenia Gonzalez right here on this program, where we have been told and we have shown for ourselves via video, Venezuelans leaving, being deported, and returning back maybe 2 or 3 days later as though it was nothing. It's just hopping off a flight or hopping whatever way to get through our borders. So who is to say that some of these special operative individuals are not currently in our country preparing already?
Well, I understand that any Venezuelan male at age 18 has to join drafted into the army, the Guardia Nacional. If that is correct, it means all the young men we see here are military trained individuals. You know, it is problematic in that if we do not have control of our borders, then any number could play in Trinidad and Tobago. What is to stop, as I said today in a news release, what is to stop a future Venezuelan government from intervening militarily in Trinidad and Tobago, ostensibly to seek the welfare of the Venezuelans in Trinidad, who they could argue are subject to human trafficking and, arrangements that lead to a cycle of poverty, etc. You see, I think we are underestimating the geopolitical situation in which we are in, and we are operating by VAPs and hoping that everything works out. But every time you disentangle any aspect of our relationships internationally, you realize that this thing is not well thought out. Trinidad and Tobago, for example, we need a refugee policy, a migrant policy. Our government says it does not want to recognize the fact that they are refugees, whatever. But we do not. Nobody knows how many Venezuelans are here. How do we intend to integrate them into the society, or do we intend to deport them at some stage? What happens to Venezuelan children who are born in Trinidad, who are citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and entitled under the Constitution to all rights of citizenship?
Yeah,
my understanding is 1 in 4 births in the public hospital system in Trinidad
is now Venezuela. And of course, your enemies will always strike when you're most vulnerable. And what we're seeing basically is that the world is somewhat making this readjustment every few years, trying to see how best they could implement their policies, taking in consideration the timing and the vulnerability of the whole system. And who is to say that we are not being viewed as that? And that's basically my question to you. How are we seen from the outside as a country that, is it a matter of political instability, as far as having no foreign policy, vulnerable? I mean, are there geopolitical sharks in the water, and are they smelling blood?
Well, here's the problem. If you look internationally at Trinidad, look at an outsider looking at Trinidad. We have travel advisories from Canada, the United States, Australia, the UK, telling their citizens essentially, do not come to Trinidad and Tobago. We are on an EU blacklist right now. 2 countries in Europe, one, Norway, is not part of the EU, but they have cancelled double tax treaty arrangements with Trinidad and Tobago. Norway has done so, and Denmark has done so. Other countries are doing the same. In terms of human trafficking, we are on a tier 3, I think it is, tier 2. On the human trafficking report, the annual report given by the U.S. State Department. We are also, that is human trafficking, we are also in human rights. We are number 2. They talk about police extrajudicial killings and whatnot, the United States. So when you look at all what foreigners are hearing about Trinidad, if we're not, and this is why we need, all we're asking for is a foreign policy that makes sense, that ties in with our domestic situation, that speaks to investment possibilities for the country, and to help us with tourism, etc. We are spending money in tourism in Tobago. I understand you'll be having an assembly woman afterwards. We are spending money on hotels, upgrading hotels and whatnot. But foreign governments, the United States, is telling their citizens, do not come to Trinidad and Tobago because of crime. So we spend the money, but at the same time, it's not tied to something that will lead to inflows of foreign exchange through tourist arrivals,
Yeah,
etc.
and I believe at this point in time, these conferences, whether it's a CARICOM conference, wherever in North America, is not basically a priority at this time. When you look at exactly as far as petrochemicals, and all these things that we trade in North America because of what happened at Petrotrin, all of that we've taken a hit. And I believe at this point in time, we need to be serious if dealing with this matter in Venezuela and Guyana with the utmost importance and the best essence of diplomacy that we can find. And I think your ending thing was that whether or not this administration, led by Dr. Rowley, is up to this monumental challenge. And that's something we need to really look at and be serious, because at any day, at any point in time, this is going to turn out to be bad. Let's put it as it is, bad, if we don't do something. I want to ask you as well as, for those people who may not be too inclined as far as geopolitics, Trinidad and Tobago remains blacklisted on the EU list of non-cooperative jurisdictions for tax purposes. And that was recently updated?
It was recently updated and we remain blacklisted. Last week it was updated and we remain on the list. And the question I've posed a question in Parliament to the Attorney General to find out what are the reasons for us being blacklisted and what do we need to do and how the opposition could help to get Trinidad and Tobago off the EU blacklist. We had a meeting. We had a joint select committee with the Minister of Finance and the then Attorney General, as far as Alwari, and we asked them the same question. Tell us what do we need to do, what laws we need to pass in order to come off the EU blacklist. They identified 4 pieces of legislation. We supported all. And lo and behold, we found out that we are still on the EU blacklist. Part of the problem, I understand, is that we pass laws, but we do not operationalize them. And the EU is looking not at the laws we pass, but are they in effect? Are there any convictions?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Those sorts of things.
Substance of it. I want to thank you so much for taking time out this evening. Any closing comment? Go right ahead.
Yes. The opposition is the alternative government, but at the same time, we are citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And we would like to support anything that the government does that redounds to the benefit of our country. The problem is, whenever there is an engagement with the government, this P&M administration, not past ones, this one, we are treated with scorn, we are treated with disrespect, we are laughed at, we are humiliated, we are ridiculed. So that the talent that exists in the United National Congress is not utilized by the government. And therefore it hurts us to see, for example, in foreign policy, we could be, their suggestion, if we were the government at Trinidad and Tobago, we would be having off-ramp discussions with the Guyanese. How could we help? What are you prepared to give? We could be talking to the Venezuelan government and saying, listen, we know we have an election coming up next year, and this may be part of your a strategy to get re-elected, to create an enemy or whatnot.
Yeah.
And therefore we could bring them together, find small areas of support. Which countries, the United States, could they play a part? Could we talk to China? We also have good relations with the Chinese government. They have a tremendous amount of investments in Trinidad. Could be talking to the Chinese to help us, to help resolve this problem. So the question is, we are there, willing, ready, and able. And the challenge is for the government to use this talent that we have. We don't have all the answers, to work with them to come up with possible solutions to the crises we face.
All right. Want to thank you so much again. It's been a pleasure. Good luck to you and your entire team, and we'll be checking in with you periodically. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.